And we are live. Hello, homemakers, and everyone in the chat or on the replay. On today's episode of Homemaking with Purpose, we're going to be talking with Mary from Mary's Nest. She's going to tell us how to fight food inflation and save a few dollars. But before we get into that, and I am certainly looking forward to getting into all of that with you, this video is sponsored by Apron Diva, our online apron boutique. Pretty and practical, we believe that an apron can be a homemaker's best accessory. And tonight's featured apron is this one. It is the crystal. We call it crystal, and it says Farm Fresh Christmas trees. It was one of our big sellers at Christmas time last year, and we got some back in this year specifically for Christmas in July. So if you missed out last year, now is your time to be able to pick one up. And just so you know, we intend to be Christmas Apron Central this year. We're going to have all kinds of Christmas aprons. So if you know someone looking for a Christmas apron, send them our way. We don't have them all in yet. We're just carrying this one right now. But when we get closer to the holiday, Christmas Apron Central. Okay, let's give Mary a warm round of applause and a big hello. Hello, hello, hello. Mary, I'm always glad to see you.
Oh, I'm so happy to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, you are quite welcome. And I tell you what, I see lots of people jumping on that haven't been here for a while. I see NJAN, not just the nurses here. And then we've got people from like Ohio's Best Peach. We've got Kathleen Hanson. We've got a lot of folks that are here because you're here. So I'm
Hey,
so glad you're with
everyone.
us.
I'm so glad everybody's here.
And then, Mary, the first thing I want to say is congratulations on the growth of your YouTube channel. You are
Oh,
just
Denise.
blowing up. Your channel is just going crazy. And I must say, I ain't mad at you. I am not mad at you one bit. Maybe a little bit jelly, but I'm certainly not mad at you. And I just want you
Oh,
guys to just check her out. 710,000 subscribers. Mary, I remember when I said, welcome to VRA. We mature ladies have got to stick together, and you have blown past all of us. So, congratulations. And for those
oh,
of you that are watching on the chat, or if you're on the replay, please drop a congratulations or the little clapping hands
oh,
in the
Denise, you're so sweet. It's like we were talking about. I really don't know. I'm really like in a little bit of a state of shock myself. I have no idea. As I said, somebody was asking me today, what's the secret sauce? I wish I knew, and it's like before the pandemic, I really didn't have a, big channel. And then the videos that I had of like homemade things just seemed to really resonate with people.
boom, they just
And
blew up. And I was thinking about this, and I don't know if I've got a comment about this in my notes or not, because sometimes I forget. Like if I write the notes the day before, or as
that's
I'm
me.
and I've had so much on my mind that I might have forgotten. But I think
Mhm.
sometimes, like you said, life events, circumstances, or trends make a difference. And you have
Mhm.
niched down from the very beginning, number one. You did
Mhm.
what they said do. You niched way down and you stuck with it, and it resonated with everyone. So hooray, hooray,
Oh,
hooray.
Denise, thank you. Well, you have a wonderful channel too.
Thank
And
you.
I want to say I just as we were talking a little bit beforehand, I just love your Apron Diva
Oh, thank you.
collection, and I'm wearing my Apple one. I don't know if
Oh,
you're
the Carrie.
yeah, if you're going to bring this back in the fall, I just got to tell everybody, as I was telling you, that the fabric that this is made out of is so amazing. I've never had an apron like this. And I have those of you, who are familiar with me, I have like this big yellow lab, and he's like 90, 95 pounds. I don't know. He's a big boy. and he thinks he's 5 pounds. And he's always, every time I sit down during the day when I'm working, and he tries to like get in my lap, and it's, where the front legs are over the thighs, and then he's trying to pull the back. So he's just like going like this. This apron looks brand new. I mean, you can wash it. It holds up to this dog, like just pawing at it. And and I mean, I get dirty outside, I throw it in the wash, but I love this because this, you could have an evening gown on and put this on, and your evening gown would be spotless.
Hey, well, that's good. Well,
So
you know
thank
what?
you.
I mean, this is a little sidebar. I hadn't intended to talk about that, but that's the whole purpose of wearing aprons. They
Mhm.
keep your clothes clean and mess free while
I
you're
really do.
doing whatever you're doing. So, like, I was cooking dinner before the show, and I had on that um, Italian apron, the one
I
with
love that.
little
That's one of
mushrooms
my
and tomatoes
favorites
on,
too.
the ones that you like, because it matched my shirt. So I had that on while I was getting dinner ready so that I could just run up here and get ready. But okay, let me get myself over here in gear, because you and me, we can chat all
I
night.
know.
All right. So as I said, we've got Mary from Mary's Nest with us, and she is going to give us some tips and tricks that we can use to help fight food inflation. That's what she's going to
Something, isn't it?
do. And like I said, Mary, so many people are struggling to put food on the table at a reasonable price. And I knew you would have lots of good ideas to share. So I
Well,
knew that. So and before we get started with the questions, I want to say that if you guys have a question after we've gotten so far through the content, put a hashtag Q in front of it, and then Mickey Blue Skies can pick it up, and then she'll send it to me. And if you hear the like the bing, 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 she's sending me questions. Sometimes, Mary, I think she's just messing with me because I keep putting all these little rings. But
hey,
usually
Mickey.
when that happens, she's sending me a note. So we've had a few people on that are just real quick. I try not to do this in the middle, but
Oh, hi, Mickey. Thank you. It's so nice to see you here. I
so
see Mickey.
Jerry Barber is saying wash hands, and then let's see, Terry's catching us live, and people are just saying, oh, Jerry is saying thank you for my gift and the note in her latest order. She adores me. Oh, I appreciate that. Thank you. I appreciate that. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started. And the first category I want us to get into, Mary, is about budget meals. I noticed that you have a somewhat new series on your channel highlighting budget meals. And I like the way you'll have budget meals, kitchen pantry, or in the kitchen, or whatever. And it helps people sort out what they're looking for on your channel.
Mhm.
So I noticed that you've got the budget meals category. So tell us why you felt the need to start your budget meals series.
Well, I really found it very stressful going to the grocery store and how expensive things were. I was there yesterday and I was shocked because I used to be able to get 6 cans of chicken, like all packed together, it's my grocery store's brand. And
Hmm.
they're pretty good sized cans of chicken. And they were $12. So that would work out to be $2 a can of chicken.
Hmm.
When I was there yesterday, they were $19.97. That's a significant increase. And the kippers in the can, I don't know if anybody likes those, but my husband and I love them, the little fish, the
My
kippers in the
husband
can.
likes them.
I love them. And they used to be 97 cents. They were $1.98. So
That's
everything, I
wow.
was shocked, everything's going up and we've been paying, it bounces around. Gas has been bouncing around here in Texas I live in central Texas between Austin and San Antonio. It's right in the middle of the state. And here gas has been bouncing around between $4 and $5. And that's like significant because maybe about a year and a half ago, here we were paying like $1.59 a gallon.
Hmm.
So that has significantly cut into my grocery budget because I've had to like siphon some money over to pay for gas. And
Well, exactly.
we just have one car, and I can imagine if you have two cars. And so I just started thinking, okay, so I said to my husband, all righty, we're gonna have to like change up a little what we cook or what I cook, you know.
Hmm.
I'm, as my husband would say, I'm the chief cook and bottle washer in the family. And I said, we're going to have to, like kind of change up. And, would you be okay if we, maybe did a meatless meal and, maybe something else? I've kind of always been a thrifty cook.
Hmm.
It's not like I was ever making filet mignon or,
Hmm.
New York strip, fancy cuts of meat, nothing like that. But I said, we got to like even pull back a little more than, get even a little more thrifty. So my mother and father, my father's since passed away. He died in his 80s, but my mom is 97
Hmm.
and she lived through the Great Depression and as did my dad, and she lived through all the rationing of World War II.
Hmm.
And then of course, I think all of us, depending on our ages, but most of us lived through, the 1970s and stagflation and all of the high grocery prices and all. So my mother is like a wealth of knowledge. She's 97. She still has all her faculties.
That's good.
She's totally fine. Oh, she was so cute during the pandemic. She said, "What do you mean Starbucks is closed? I like my fancy coffee." But and I was just starting to talk with her, of course, over a coffee, on Sunday, but like a homemade coffee. But we were chatting, and just a couple of Sundays ago, and I was saying, boy, I really got to bring out the budget meals. And I was trying to remember, like, because she was very thrifty and the things she would make. And I said, I have to, whatever I make, I'm going to share with, if it's good, I'm going to share this with people.
Well, I saw that one of the ones you shared was the tuna pie, I believe
Oh
it
my
was.
gosh,
And
that's
it was
so
just
good.
so it was so funny that you had made tuna pie because that very day or either the day before, my husband and I were making tuna patties. He said he had seen something online, and
Uh-huh.
when he was little, his mom made salmon patties. So
Yes.
he wanted to make tuna patties. So we were making that. And I'm like, oh, look, Mary's. But now I didn't video mine for the channel. But I thought,
Mhm.
okay, and they came out so good because, I'm not a big fish eater. They
Uh-huh.
came out so good. I thought, well, I'm going to have to make this for my channel. And then, boom, there was yours, your
Oh,
tuna pie.
yeah,
So,
make your tuna patties. I would love to see that. I'd love to see how to do that. Yeah, I gotta tell you, my husband loves tuna noodle casserole, but my son not so much. And so he's been staying with us for now. And I said, I saw this. I couldn't show the cookbook in the video because I didn't buy it. I saw it at a used bookstore and it was like vintage and it was expensive. So I was just reading the recipe, but I got such a kick out of it because some of those depression era recipes, they assume a lot. So
mhm.
you kind of got to guess and fill in the blanks. But I loved it because it sounded like a chicken pot pie, but without the crust. Because it was potatoes and veggies and a white sauce, and then you put the tuna fish in, and then you put the biscuits on top. And those biscuits were so clever because I never saw biscuits made like that, where you roll it and then you cut them. It reminded me of that thing, the store. I don't know if they still make them anymore, but you bang it on the counter and it
Oh,
pops
yeah, a can of
open.
biscuits, they pop open. You just
Yeah,
like,
yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
I buy those all the time.
And this you make these kind of, but they're homemade, but it's very similar. And then you put them on top of the casserole. Well, I have to tell you, my son's not a fan of tuna fish type things,
Hmm.
and he's not a fan of tuna noodle casserole. And whenever I would make it, he would always say, "Oh my gosh, the budget food, the thrifty food." But my husband inhaled it, and I think he had like for lunch or something. And when our son came for dinner, I said, "It's actually really good. You're going to really like it." And he loved it. So
Good.
I said, "Okay, this is something good, to share with people because it's very inexpensive to make."
So then
And
tell me, since you're talking about inexpensive meals, what are some of your favorite or we'll say your most budget friendly meat and protein buys?
well, I would say that it used to be like canned chicken, but that's like gotten kind of expensive now. But I will say that I think if you now I know it's hard if you're a little fish averse, but if the even though the canned fish has gone up in price, tuna fish is still a pretty good buy. So I feel that's a good protein source, and you can really stretch it. And I'll give you a tip about all of this. When it comes to protein foods, of course you have beans and you have grains, and then you combine them and it becomes a complete protein and all of that. But you know what the secret is? You can stretch the whatever protein you're using. So maybe, like I had a budget meal where I made meatballs, but I put in like a lot of oatmeal and I only used a half a pound of ground beef. And then I made spaghetti sauce and so on and so forth. But my secret is any meal you serve, especially if you have kids and teenagers who they really need the protein because they're growing and you have to make sure that they get the right amount of nutrition. Because I always did this with my son, because when my son was young and we were first married, we moved out here because it was less expensive and I had become a stay-at-home mom. Money was very tight.
Mhm.
And uh, the secret is always serve bone broth. Serve it as a soup before the main meal, or serve it. My son loves it to this day in a mug with some sea salt, because bone broth is what's known as a protein sparer. And so what that means is it will eke out in itself. It's high in protein, bone broth, because bone broth is rich in collagen, and collagen is a protein. So the bone broth is rich in protein, but this thing that it's called a protein sparer means that it allows you to extract every little last bit of protein in any food you're eating. It makes your digestive system really absorb all of the protein. So
Okay.
that is really what I find to kind of be a little bit of a secret to get as much protein in a very inexpensive way. And I'll tell you how to do it inexpensively, because beef bones have gone up in price.
Mm.
Somebody was just I think they sent me an email or leave them a comment, I'm not sure, and they were saying that they went to pick up some beef bones to buy and it said $30, and she said she dropped them so fast like they were on fire.
Wait, for bones?
Yes.
Hmm.
And I've been seeing this. People have been telling me that, because bone broth has become kind of shishi,
Well, okay, so now let's talk about that just for a minute.
Mhm.
Um, so when we talk about bone broth and serving that like with the meals to help stress the protein, I was just reading something about like back in the Depression era or even earlier, and that they used to serve like the bone broth as a tea with the meal. So maybe you'd have like a little cup of bone broth that was warmed up, and you'd have that as tea or as a warm drink with your breakfast or something like that, or with another part of your meal. So that is certainly a way that you can add the additional proteins. And I had not thought of that until I read that. So, okay.
Oh yes,
So tuna fish,
that
making your own meatballs and extending them with, say, oatmeal and other
oatmeal,
grains.
or you can use anything. You can grind up oatmeal, and you can use like the oat groats. You can use, which always look to be buying whatever's the least expensive form of a grain. And you can use barley. Barley is really
I
great.
love barley.
And people do, nobody notices it. But the secret with the bone broth, if you do get a whole chicken and you roast it, save that whole carcass and make your bone broth with that. That's a very inexpensive way to make bone broth. And if you want an even cheaper way, if you can find them periodically, my grocery store will have them, and periodically Walmart will have them, are the chicken feet, and they call them the chicken paws. I know this is your favorite subject, Denise, but you can take 6 chicken feet and throw them in a stock pot with some like vegetable scraps that you've just saved, like the tips of carrots and some bottom
Okay.
of celery and some onion skins. You will have such a rich gelatinous bone broth. And now I don't know, everything's like changing constantly, but the last time I bought a pack of chicken feet, it said chicken paws. It was good. It had about more than 12 feet in the
Yeah,
package.
they've got quite a few in the pack.
It's $2.99.
Yeah, they're pretty inexpensive. I don't think a lot of people are buying chicken paws right now. So I think you can still get those pretty reasonably. So let's say I'm a vegan. I'm not, but let's just say I'm plain, the advocate. I'm a vegan. So what are some protein sources you might suggest for me? Like some budget-friendly dishes for protein sources for me and my family, because we're vegan.
That's a really good question. I don't know too much about what vegan people eat. I understand, vegetarian and all of
Mhm.
that, but I was really intrigued talking with people who are vegans and how they have to be really careful. Like they don't even take, or at least some of them, like honey, because it comes somehow from the bee and all, and it has the bee saliva, maybe. I don't know. But it was very interesting to me. So I think whatever they do, they have to, if they're very experienced, they're going to know what they can eat. Or if it's a
Mhm.
new dietary regime, they're going to have to be careful to check. But I think that vegans also sometimes tend to like eating a raw diet also.
Mhm.
That seems sometimes to go hand in hand. And I think they're going to have to really rely on doing the best they can with fruits and vegetables and whole grains and beans. Uh, Whole grains I've noticed have been, well, everything's been going up in
Going
price,
back.
unfortunately. And whole grains, I'm shocked at how expensive they've become. But I think that it's difficult. Uh, it can be very difficult, I think, for people who have restrictive or special diets because they're kind of pigeonholed into having to buy certain things over other things, because I'm not like a brand loyal or a or a product loyal person. I kind of buy, and I can pretty much eat anything. I'll buy whatever's on sale. We'll try a meatless meal, a chicken meal, a fish meal, whatever the case may be. But I think for vegans, sometimes I've read that two things are difficult for them: getting B12, because most of that comes from animal protein. And so I think sometimes they have to make sure, and this would probably be a good place for them to put a little money to get the appropriate B12 supplement.
Mhm.
Because they may not be able to get enough of that from their food. And I also think something that's very inexpensive to make, but that can be very nourishing, and not just for vegans, but for all of us, is making mineral broths. But I think that that's especially important for vegans because they may not get the whole complex of vitamins and minerals from the diet that they have. And a mineral broth is very easy to make because basically you're taking vegetable scraps and maybe a sweet potato or even a white potato if they're, and I would think they would be able to eat all of these things. And you can do this in the instant pot. You can do it on the stove, in a stock pot and a slow cooker. And I would recommend that they always have a really good supply of mineral broth going. And
Okay.
it's inexpensive to make because you can really make it from a lot of scraps. If they're able to have a little garden, I think that's probably one of the best ways for vegans and vegetarians to save money because they can grow some of their own food and that are things they can eat,
Okay.
especially vegetables and
So
herbs.
we got a couple comments coming in. And so Lurker Smurf says ethnic markets are good for uncommon meats and spare parts like bones and organs. And I think I remember you talking about that once before.
Yes. Well, I think my husband is of Asian descent, and so we will often shop at different Asian markets.
Okay.
And some of them you can get some pretty good buys.
Okay.
But some of them you have to be a little careful. The ones that have become like these big kind of Sam's and Costco size. I don't know, depending on where people live around the country or around the world, what they'll have. But we have this big one. I think it was started by a Korean company. I'm not sure. And it's real big.
Mhm.
And the prices were a little on the high side. But I
Okay.
think the smaller ethnic markets are fantastic.
Okay.
And
So now
and
let me point out now Nefertiti is saying what she'll sometimes do is have a cup of bone broth with a slice of homemade bread.
Mhm.
And then Wendy says sausage, beans, and rice is a good way to stretch protein and just use half of the kielbasa. Now that's something that she brought up that I mentioned in one of my last videos, in that we're going to have possibly consider eating less meat and augmenting that dish with more vegetables and things like that.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah,
Kim,
for about $10, you can get a kielbasa and some cabbage, and that's a very traditional kind of German. There are a lot of German settlers here in the Hill Country, and so that's like a common dish that you see a lot of people of German ancestry making. And I think that advice uh, from the viewer was terrific. That cut the kielbasa in half and divide that up into 2 meals and just put more cabbage in,
mhm,
because I made kielbasa and cabbage, and the whole thing cost me $10. It was a healthy amount. I think you could easily have served 6 people
mhm.
from that. So that's definitely a budget meal.
Okay.
But
And so
I
what's
think
your
taking it,
favorite budget for what is
my
your
favorite.
what is your favorite budget friendly Sunday dinners? Because and I say Sunday dinner because that's the time where we typically have more time to cook, and the family tends to sit at the table a little bit longer, spend a little more time together. So what's your favorite budget friendly Sunday dinner?
Oh, that's a great question. Well, I think I'll tell you what my budget friendly is in a sec. But if I can find it at a good price, I'll always roast a chicken on Sunday. I always grew up with roast chicken, and
That's us.
I love that as the
Chicken
Sunday.
on Sunday.
But what I've been doing a lot lately is I've just been, and this is probably part of my Italian heritage. I have been making a big bowl of spaghetti, and I'll do a meat sauce. And you have to remember, spaghetti's, a lot of people think, oh, white flour. No, no, no. Spaghetti is actually made from durum semolina, and semolina is the middlings when they sift the durum flour to get a whole, an all-purpose durum flour.
Mhm.
But semolina is the middlings, and it's actually very nutritious. And so I'll make a big bowl of spaghetti. My family loves this. And then I'll just take half a pound of the ground beef, which normally I would like use the whole
The
pound.
whole pound.
And then I'll take, rather than my usual, you know, when I go all out back in the day, 4 sweet sausages, 4 spicy Italian sausages, I would really, beef it up. Now I'll do like 2 sweet sausages, 2 spicy sausages, a half a pound of ground beef. Nobody misses it. What I do is I'll make a big bowl that's like a bolognese, a meat
Mhm.
sauce, but then I'll add a couple of cans of, instead of tomato sauce, I'll add a couple of cans of the chopped tomatoes. So
Yes.
it kind of bulks it out. And then I'll just do I'll make an Italian bread with sourdough, and it's basically like making a boule. It costs like 50 cents to make when you make
Okay.
them homemade. And I'll just like elongate it, not like a baguette, but more like a loaf of Italian
Mhm.
bread. I'll bake that up. I'll split that. I put on a little butter, a little parsley, which, here most of the time the climate's pretty good, where I can grow a lot of stuff. And I'll just do a little fresh oregano, maybe a little flat leaf Italian parsley, a little powdered, little garlic powder. These are all inexpensive things. And the bread maybe cost me about 50 cents to make, and they're happy. Big thing of spaghetti. I have leftovers. They inhale the bread. That if I get smart, I'll make more than one loaf at a time. But that really doesn't cost me very much at all, because the ground beef, that's even getting expensive, but that's been running like $5 to $6 a pound. But when I cut it in half, so say, okay, 250 to $3, and the sausage are a lot less, pork is always less expensive than beef. And that, I would even serve that to company, so I think that's a really good thing to do when everybody, feels hungry. And like you said, we pretty much always have bone broth at every meal. So, and it was funny when you said about breakfast. My son's been drinking bone broth at breakfast since he was a little kid, and
Okay.
just
Well, that's
really
something that I just came across, and I thought, it's not something I would have thought to do, but okay. So now, since we're talking about bone broths and ferments, one of the before we do that, desserts for Sunday dinner. Budget-friendly desserts, simple, super simple for Sunday dinner. Any ideas?
Well, I have to tell you, and this actually goes back to my mom, but for us, that was the only time we had dessert was
Sunday.
Sunday dinner. And we thought that this was something that was so fancy and special. And even when we would have company and the other little kids, would be at the table and they would think it was so fancy, my mother would serve the fruit cocktail, remember, in the can?
Yes.
And
We used to
you know
have
how
that.
it had like the little cherries, but they were like halves?
Yes.
If you had enough like to put on top of everybody's, and the portions back then were so much smaller than they are
Yes.
today. And she had these cute little cups that had like a stem.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe she had probably got them at a thrift shop. They were probably like champagne glasses. And she would put a little bit of the fruit in. And back then, the fruit, I don't remember things being juice packed and all like they are today, but it wasn't high fructose corn syrup either. It was usually just a sugar water.
Mm-hmm.
She would pour that off and then she would save that. And then she would put the fruit cocktail from the can, which, by the way, at Aldi's, you can still get a really good buy on that.
Yes, I bought some the other day.
The other week, and she'd put the little fruit cocktail in the cup. She'd put and then she'd take a little cream and she would whip that with a little bit of the syrup that she saved, that she drained off from the
Mm-hmm.
fruit. She'd put a little dollop of the cream and then she'd put the little cherry on top. And I just feel this is so budget friendly. And so I have been experimenting with this, and my family's so happy. I mean, last Sunday I gave sliced nectarines. I had some nectarines and that I got on sale at HEB, and I just sliced up some nectarines, and everybody was happy. So that
Well,
was
people
fun.
are sharing what their moms used to make. And Kim says she will make cherry crisp or apple crisp and jello with fruit. And we used to have jello with fruit a lot.
Yes.
And then this lady says that her mom used to serve fruit cocktail for dessert also. We had a lot of fruit cocktail in jello as well.
Yes, we did
So,
too. We did
and then
too.
Jeanette says she would make extra beef stew gravy and have bread and biscuits. So she says they were in the South. So
Oh,
that would be a way to kind of stretch some things too. So now since we were talking, oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, speaking of the South, that's a really good dessert that you can do if you like thinking that maybe you're not a fan of the fruit cocktail. In the South, I learned that there's this recipe, and I don't even know what it's called, but they take the fruit cocktail and they mix it. They whip the cream, and I think sometimes like they would be using Cool Whip, but you would like take real cream and whip it, and then you mix it with the I think they put in some sweetened condensed milk,
Mm-hmm.
and you can make that homemade. It's easy to make with just milk and some sugar. And then they put it in a baking pot, like a pie, a
Mm-hmm.
rectangle baking dish, and you freeze it. And then you
Oh.
cut it into squares and serve it. And I forget what they call that. It's delicious.
Oh,
And
that does sound good. We'll have to investigate that recipe. We'll
yeah,
have to spend some time looking for
it's
that.
like ice cream. It's all over the internet. I'll look it up and
Okay.
I'll try to find it. But the texture becomes like ice cream. So it's like this ice cream with this fruit in it, and it's very tasty. And that's inexpensive to make. But
Okay. So now
the
backing up to
the
bone
res-
broth.
what'd you say?
I said backing up to bone broth now.
Oh yes.
You know, I started making bone broth because of you. Because there was a time where I would make the turkey or whatever, and I would save some of the drippings off so I can make dressing another time. But I didn't really think about making bone broth, making my own. And then you had a video called Making Bone Broth for Pennies on the Dollar. And I tried it and I thought, oh, so now it's like I never just pour stuff off. Like if I'm making a chicken, I'm going to add extra water, extra onions and carrots and that kind of thing. So I've got the broth that I can use myself for other times. So how did you get started making bone broth? And then why should I consider making my own?
Well, that is really something I learned from my mother, you know. I mean,
Okay.
my parents were so thrifty. Nothing went to waste. I mean, I think I've shared this story with you. One time my father was sitting here in the kitchen with me having a coffee, and the newspaper, this is back when the newspaper came, and I took the rubber band off the newspaper, and it was all dirty and whatnot. And I went to throw it in the garbage. And my father said, "You throw away the best stuff. I'll take that home with me. I could use that rubber band, you know." And my mother's the same way, you know. My mother, the concept to throw food out, you know, I mean, these are people who had no food often. My father was very poor, took the food out of, you know, garbage cans. It's so sad, you know, when you hear
Hmm.
the stories. But so my mother always made bone broth because nothing went to waste. And so I just always grew up making it. And then when I got married, you know, I wanted to feed my son the same way, you know, my mother had fed me. And so I just would start making bone broth, and then I would tell everybody it's liquid gold, you know. But I think it's important to make it homemade. And I can understand, you know, right now when budgets are tight and beef bones might be a little expensive, making beef bone broth may be a little prohibitive. I haven't really made it in a while because it's just been a little too expensive for me. But I make, every time I roast a chicken, I make chicken bone broth. Every time I can find chicken feet, I make chicken bone broth. It's very inexpensive when you're just using scraps. And you know what, the chicken carcass would might have otherwise went in the garbage. You know, why not extract every bit of nutrition from it? Plus, I have purchased bone broth from the grocery store. And you have to remember, they have to pressure can it so that it can be shelf stable.
Hmm.
Pressure can it, they break the gelatin. Now, it still has some nutrition, but it's really that gelatin we're after. You know how when you chill it, it's jiggly?
Yes.
And it's that gelatin that really soothes our digestive tract, which when our digestive tracts are soothed and kept in good condition, they're better able to keep a good flora, you know, the good
Hmm.
probiotics that keep us, the better our probiotics are, the better, the healthier we are, you know. And you probably know a lot more about this than I do. But that's, and the taste, everything homemade
It
is always
tastes so much better.
so much better, right? You know, and so I think that it's funny. I remember when bone broth first started becoming popular, I saw it in the
And
jar.
you made it more popular.
I don't know about that, but I think a lot of people made it popular. But uh, it a jar was $12 at the grocery store, and I said
So
to
let
my
me ask you this, Mary. Let me just cut you off for a
oh
second.
no, you're
So
fine.
let's
I'm sorry.
say,
I can go on and on and on.
well, let's just say I'm a young homemaker because I really want you to speak to my young homemakers today, as well as my seasoned homemakers. But for those young homemakers who are really trying to figure it out, and I think you've done a pretty good job of explaining why we need to consider making our own bone broth. So I'm a young homemaker. How do I get started? What do I need? And then we're going to have to move into your pantry because I keep getting like bing, bing, bing. So let's talk about how the young homemakers or even the seasoned homemakers can get started, and then we'll move over and talk about your pantry.
I think it's very easy to get started. You really don't need anything fancy. You do like a little inventory in your kitchen and say, "Oh, excuse me, I think I'm gonna sneeze. Oh, I'm okay."
We're on the bone broth.
uh, and just do a little inventory. And if all you have is like a little stock pot, or if you have a slow cooker, a lot of people have those. You really don't need any expensive equipment. And if you've learned, like I always say, especially to the young person and especially to the new home cook, and especially when you're busy, especially if you have young children and things are crazy, just start with a roast chicken. Never stress yourself. Make it very simple. Just, and even if you're not comfortable touching raw poultry, just put those, whatever those disposable gloves are, put
Hmm.
those on and just get that roast chicken. You don't even need a roasting pan if you have one of those flat baking pans, you know, the jelly roll pans, the cookie sheet pans. If you have just a baking dish, if you have a cast iron frying pan, just plop that thing down in there, and you don't even need a rack. Put some carrots down to be as your rack and some celery.
That's
And
what I do.
yeah, you know, it works great. Put your chicken on top of that. preheat your oven 350 degrees Fahrenheit, put your chicken in, and then the oven does the work. You can
Okay.
go about whatever else you have to tend to. It's 5 minutes to get it into the oven. And don't, and you know what? I'm never going to tell anybody they have to buy organic or grass fed. You're a young homemaker, your budget is tight, food is expensive now. Anything you buy that's a whole food is going to be so much better than anything you buy that's prepared for you or packaged or fast food or any of that. You
Mm-hmm.
get that whole chicken and then you can feed your family or yourself. I was single for a very long time. I ate many meals alone and I roasted many chickens, and then that would serve me, well, the whole week. But roast that chicken, feed whoever you have to feed, pick every single scrap off of that chicken carcass. Whatever looks really nice, save that for maybe to put in a soup with the bone broth you're going to make with the carcass, or serve it in some other way. And then any other scraps that may not be the most appetizing, chop those up, mix them with some spices, make tacos or
Mm-hmm.
whatever, or use them as a filling for something, anything you want to do like that. Then put that carcass in a stock pot, make some bone broth, use that bone broth as a base for soups and stews. And something else that young homemakers may not realize, you can always take your bone broth and take white rice, which is, it's less nutritious than brown rice, but it also has a wonderful shelf life. Take
Yes.
that white rice and instead of water, make it with bone broth, add a little butter, add a little sea salt, and now you've used that white rice as a vehicle to get nutrition, especially into young children who may balk at certain foods, and they think they're just eating rice. And
Okay.
instead, they're getting bone broth, butter, and the minerals from sea salt. And these are all affordable things, and they're
Very
easy to
affordable.
do.
Very
And
affordable and so easy. Okay, so you've heard the bing, bing, bing. So I've got one here that says, um, well, we're going to do that one in a minute. I'm wondering, it seems like making the meals stretch. They wind up being one pot meals, rice or beans, some veggies, and different seasoning. It's weird, but it's weird, but also a good sort of depression. I don't know. So it's like it's weird and it's depressing, but they're not sure. So there's that one. And then one says, Mother's Helper 1981. My Indiana grandmother used to save the rubber bands and loop them over doorknobs. Every doorknob in the house had rubber bands. Remember those crystal doorknobs? Yep, full of
yeah,
rubber
I
bands.
grew up in a house like that.
I remember
We had the
those.
crystal glass, crystal doorknobs with the little key thing
Yes.
underneath, like with the skeleton key. And yes, there were rubber bands, especially on the doors near the kitchen. That's
And then Jeanette Schul says, I had a Chinese friend. They make soups for desserts. I
yes.
had like a jello thickened with sweet jello with something. Oh, with kidney beans and coconut milk.
Hmm.
Soup with cocoa milk, cantaloupe, dices, and purple taro balls. Some kind of purple fruit balls.
Yeah, my taro is a what is it like it's a plant, and I don't know if they do the like I think the Hawaiians call it poi, and it looks kind of like purpley and like a paste, and they can do different things with it.
Hmm.
Yeah, my mother-in-law, I mean, her desserts are all gelatin based, and
Okay.
she'll use like the Knox gelatin, and then she'll just use different things that she has on hand to kind of give them a little bit of sweetness, and it's
Okay.
I'm used to it now. It used to be very foreign to me, but they're very tasty. And my husband said that's what they always had these gelatinous type things when he was growing up. So I think that's probably pretty common. And then the tapioca, they have the
Oh,
tapioca
I loved tapioca
that have
pudding when
little,
I was a kid.
yeah, Yeah.
We see here Rhonda McComb says she's a young homemaker, and every time she cooks meat with bones, she saves them and throws them in a pot with whatever veggie scraps, onions, and cook it, and it's pretty easy. Okay,
Oh
so
yeah,
let me.
never throw out your bones.
Okay, so now we've looked at that. Let me just refresh those people who have joined us late. For those of you who are just joining in, we've got Mary from Mary's Nest, and she's given us some tips on how to deal with food inflation. And then also tonight's featured apron is the crystal. You can see it hanging back there on my door. It's a Christmas one. And so I was going to go to bread making, but before we go to that, let's go to your Four Corners pantry because that was a question from um, somebody. I just lost it, but somebody had the question. They wanted you to talk about your Four Corners pantry. And we often hear about the prepper pantry, and I sometimes call mine the extended pantry.
Yes.
But you put a different spin on it. You talk about the Four Corners pantry. So what is a Four Corners pantry and why do we need one?
Well, it's just a very simple concept of taking all the different places where most of us store food. You have your working pantry, which is like a little. I have a little closet. I don't have like a walk-in thing, but I have a little closet. Maybe you have a cupboard. Maybe you have a nice, real big walk-in pantry. What you access every day, and it holds non-perishable foods. Then the second corner is your refrigerator. The third corner is your freezer, and then your fourth corner is your extended pantry, or what we call nickname the prepper pantry. And
Yes.
basically, what we do there is keep all our backup supplies so that when food runs low in our, it's all non perishables. And when
Mm-hmm.
foods run low in our working pantry, then we can go shopping in our extended pantry or a prepper pantry and refurbish or refill our working pantry. And what's nice about that is when you have this fourth place where you can store food, like I don't have a, big place to store it. I just have I've basically commandeered the closet under my stairway, and I just have kind of shelves on either side and the coats, it's kind of crazy
Mm-hmm.
in there. But when I find food on sale, and or I have a coupon or there's an in-store coupon, I'll buy that, and I'll buy a couple of them rather than just buying one, to put in my working pantry and get through the week. I'll buy two or three and then I'll put them in my extended pantry. And then that's nice because, and that really, boy, I've been doing this for years. And so I've really built up my extended pantry. I think, Denise, you have too.
Mm-hmm.
We have a really good supply of food, and that really helped us back in 2020 when we couldn't go to the grocery
Yeah.
store or there were lines or it was limited how many people could go. And, I don't know if you probably feel the same way, given my age, I was scared when the
Well,
pandemic
exactly.
hit.
I
And
didn't want to have to go out to the grocery stores. I
yeah,
started ordering my groceries, or I would go really early in the morning. And
yeah,
I had looked at a study from England, and they said that some people who contracted COVID, the only link they had was they had gone out to the grocery store. So I
yeah.
was really trying to avoid that. So,
And so
okay,
I was
so
just shopping. I was shopping in my extended pantry, and we were eating a lot of pantry
exactly.
meals.
Well, and then here's the other thing. Like right now, with the rising cost of food, I can shop in my extended pantry and not have to go out and buy something right now. But like you said, when I do go out and I see something on sale, maybe I'll pick up two or three instead of just one. So then
Yeah.
for our young homemakers, and one of them is on here, she said, I'm a young homemaker. How would you suggest they get started? If they've not started yet, what would you suggest they do to get started in building a Four Corners pantry?
I think the easiest way to get started is number one, do an inventory of what you have, because it can often be surprising how much you actually already have.
Mm-hmm.
And I know when I first started doing an inventory, and that was something that I probably started maybe 5 years ago. I wasn't always on top of doing an inventory. And then I said, no, this has got to stop. I got to start really knowing what I have. And I was surprised at how much I had, you know? And so that's the first thing, do an inventory. And as you do the inventory, and I have something they can download, and it's free. You don't have to put an email in or anything, and you can print out a whole bunch of these. It lists each corner. It has an inventory for your working pantry, an inventory for your refrigerator, your freezer, and then your prepper pantry. And you can check, how much you have, and it takes a little time. I mean, it wasn't something I had finished in 5 minutes, and I kind of did it a little in stages over a week when I first inventoried all the food that I had. And then you can see, what do you need to have more of, and what do you maybe not need anything right now. And so then once you have your list compiled, okay, and basically starting with your non-perishables, if you're focused on building your prepper pantry, okay, I have a good supply of pasta, but I'm really low on rice, and I don't have any whole grains. I don't even have old-fashioned rolled oats, you know? And then you could start looking and seeing,
You how to get my free.
It's funny to see myself. But oh yeah, that's the pantry list of things to consider that you may want to add to your Four Corners pantry. And that's 36 pages. So sometimes people like to just download it to their phones or something and use it as a guide when they go to the grocery store, so they're not trying to print that out. But the interesting thing is, I think that once you have a snapshot of what you do have, and if you're one of those people who, and I raise my hand, I was guilty of this, whose pantry is kind of like a big mishmash and cluttered. When you take everything out and you start to put things back, and you have great videos on this, that you inspire me, Denise, to organize my own pantry and under my sink and all that.
Mm-hmm.
But once you have things in a little orderly fashion, then you can maybe move some of the things out of your working pantry to give yourself a little more room, a little more breathing room in there, and then start putting those in wherever you're going to start your prepper pantry. And it can be, like I said, I just commandeered the whole closet underneath my stairwell, because I don't have like a separate room that I could commandeer,
Mm-hmm.
so I just did it under my stairwell. Other people talk about having different bins, and then they just label it. Okay, this
Yeah.
is the pasta, this is my grains, and they push them under a bed. I'm going to tell you a really funny story about where to store food. But in my living room, I have a coffee table in front of the couch. And this kind of started during the pandemic, and I
Mm-hmm.
kind of am just living with it. But I have baskets under my coffee table. And in the baskets is where I keep all my canned tomato products. And everybody who knows me is so used to me. And they're like, oh, yeah, she stores food under her coffee table. But my mother, I was very worried, during the pandemic. I don't drink, and neither does my husband. But my mother said, and my mother doesn't drink either. And my mother says, but you want to make sure you have a bottle of whiskey in the house, because that's going to really be a good disinfectant
Mm-hmm.
case we have some real serious, because people who are my mother's age, they think very differently, because they have been through such difficult situations where they couldn't get medication and whatnot. So I go to the liquor store and I buy a bottle of whiskey and I pay cash, because I don't want to have a record on my credit card. Well, I put it under the table in
It's
my
not illegal to buy
I
whiskey.
know, I'm so silly, right? I'm so silly. So I put the bottle of whiskey underneath my coffee table, because I didn't know where to store it at that particular moment. So my
Vice cabinet.
Yeah, so my girlfriend comes over and she sees the bottle of whiskey on the floor, and she comes and she hugs me and she goes, "Oh, honey, is everything okay?"
Mary's a secret imbiber.
Yeah, that just
Okay.
really made me laugh. But yeah, you kind of just got to figure out, that's the first place, the first thing, do your inventory, then figure out where you're going to put any extra food you might get lucky and find in your working pantry. And then after that, make your list. take, I always say take an extra $5. I know it doesn't go far today, but sometimes that's all we can squeak and eke out,
Yes.
and take that $5 and buy a few non-perishable foods that you think you might need. Maybe a can of tuna, maybe a box of spaghetti, simple things.
Jar of pasta sauce.
A jar of pasta sauce, things that you say, okay, I can make a meal with this. And then little by little each week, with that $5, then that you're adding to your grocery budget, you're going to find that in a couple of weeks, you're getting a nice little supply of food.
And
Now,
that was going to be my next question too, was that if the budget is limited, particularly during these inflationary times, how can I begin to build a prepper pantry or an extended pantry? And you perfectly answered that question before I had the chance to ask, which was just take five
it's $5.
weeks.
And then some people have asked me, they said, okay, that's great. But right now, in 2 weeks, prices may be even higher. So I got to accelerate this. I need to start a prepper pantry. And it's sometimes people are so cute, they write to me, oh, I'm sorry, I didn't start one yet. And I'm like, don't worry about it. It's never too late to start. And they say, but I need to accelerate this process. So what I say is look at your shopping list and that's why I always say have a kitchen journal and kind of save your shopping list, keep track of what you buy every week, because you may not buy, the same things every week. But if
Mhm.
you can get a picture of about a month or two of the things that you buy, but you want to accelerate your prepper pantry, then you're going to have to go through your grocery shopping list. And this is not forever, because everybody was screaming at me when I talked about some of the things you had to delete, for a couple of weeks. But all you do is go through your shopping list. And if you buy things that are really more luxuries, maybe like chocolate, I love chocolate, just for 2 weeks, just scratch it off and get down to your bare, what do you need bare bones to feed yourself or your family or friends, whomever you're feeding, for a couple of weeks, and just get it down bare bones. Don't buy any extra shampoo. Don't buy anything like that. Then you're going to find when you do that and you really cross a lot of things off your grocery list that maybe aren't, essentials.
Mhm.
They're more, unessentials, but nice things to have.
Nice to have.
Then you may find you have 20 or $30 to put towards filling your prepper pantry. And also, this is unrelated to food, but my girlfriend wanted to start a prepper pantry because she kept coming over, and she's got the same kind of situation that I do, where all she has is a thing under the stairwell, and it was all filled with toys. Her son is like 25 years old, So I said, you're cleaning all that out, and you're going to make your prepper pantry. And she said, that's perfect. So we had a garage sale and she made $400.
Oh my.
Can you imagine? Her pantry is so stocked, and she even got toilet paper and whatever other personal care items she needed, So there's a lot of things that you can do. You can even, if, and they don't pay a lot, but if you have used bookstores in your area and you've got a lot of books in your house that you really don't need, you really don't read, you may just get 10, 15, $20. But at the end of all of this, you might find, wow, I've got an extra $100. And I can
Let's
go
back
and buy
up for a
my
second. I just
food.
thought about something. Let's back up for a second. And let's talk about meal extenders, because you touched on that, but it kind of popped into my head like when this bing was coming up, I was like, oh, meal extenders. So you talked about pasta sauce and spaghetti and ground beef, but what are some other make a meal or meal extender kind of foods that the young homemakers can purchase to help with their food budget, feed their families, or build their extended pantry?
Well, I think, one thing I think we should all be buying, assuming that it agrees with us, are not so much the tomato sauce, because you can just whirl whole tomatoes that you buy in the can that are usually less expensive, and then add in your own herbs and spices, whatever, to make your tomato sauce. But I think something that's really invaluable for extending meals are the chopped canned tomatoes,
Hmm.
that are chopped up. Those really give bulk. I also think another thing is mushrooms. If you can either get mushrooms on sale
Mushroom.
and dehydrate them, you are light years ahead because they give that, like you always hear the chefs talk umami. I don't know if I'm saying it right. That mouth taste that people crave when they don't maybe have enough meat if they're used to eating meat. And mushrooms give that texture.
Mm-hmm.
And I have done this where I have done meals where I've just used a lot of mushrooms that I dehydrated. There are people who will go to the farmer's market and they'll buy mushrooms in bulk. They'll make arrangements with the farmer in advance to get the mushrooms in bulk, and then they'll dehydrate them. Or you can often look at the big box stores, they'll sell. I got a big canister. Somebody told me, like, I think it was at Costco, had these big canisters, and it was quite reasonable, of dehydrated mushrooms. And there were all kinds of mushrooms. And you have to remember, even if you're just buying the white button mushrooms, those typical little mushrooms at the grocery store, mushrooms are very nutritious. They have
Yes.
all kinds of vitamins and minerals. And so, always have mushrooms on hand. And if and you can dehydrate them in your oven. You don't even need a special dehydrator. You just put them, slice them real thin, put them, on baking sheets, put down maybe some parchment paper, and then let them dry in your oven, and start getting into this routine of incorporating mushrooms into your meals, because you can grind them up and make a mushroom powder, and use that in place of other things like grains. Like if you're saying, oh, I don't really like putting oatmeal in my meatballs or
Yeah.
in my hamburgers, put in some of that mushroom powder. No, that tastes really beef like. And you can, even if you find on sale, um, the cremini mushrooms. I think they call them baby bellas, because they're
Yeah.
actually
Baby Bellas.
portobellas that haven't grown. They're just picked young when they're small, and they're incredibly nutritious. And they can, if you just chop, like, quarter them
Mm-hmm.
and put them into a tomato sauce. It's like the Italian in me too. I talk a lot about tomato sauce, but you can just make like a mock bolognese with no meat and just use the chunky tomatoes.
Mm-hmm.
Whirl some whole tomatoes in your blender. That's your sauce base, and then put in some chopped tomatoes and some mushrooms. It's wonderful. But I
So
think
let
that
me
those are some meal extenders that are sometimes dried mushrooms. I think people forget about.
I think another meal extender people forget about is bread or
Yes.
biscuits or cornbread muffins and those kinds of things. And during the shutdown, people just went crazy baking bread. And sourdough was one in particular that everyone was trying to make. So, can you tell me, why should all of our young homemakers be able to bake bread?
Well, first of all, the bread you make at home is going to be less expensive, number one, than the bread you buy. Now, some people say, oh, yeah, but I can get a big loaf of sandwich bread maybe for 89 cents or whatever. And that's true. And that's a very reasonable price. But when you read the ingredients, and I'm all about, going on that journey from what I call a processed foods kitchen to a traditional foods kitchen. When you read the ingredients, there are dough conditioners and preservatives, and then a whole bunch of things, you can't pronounce. And I think that as any homemaker, and especially a young homemaker, as you're starting to create your kitchen and build what you bring into your home and what you bring into your kitchen and what you feed your family, if you're willing to be a homemaker, you really need to think about bringing in the most whole foods, no, not the store, but real foods as possible, because everybody's going to be healthier and happier for it, and less likely to be at the doctor or develop, serious illness and so on and so forth. Because I think it really is all of, you are what you eat. And making sandwich bread is so easy. And that was the recipe that really took off when the pandemic hit.
Mhm.
People wanted to know, not a fancy sourdough boule. That became more popular as people recognized that they couldn't find yeast and they wanted to know how to make a starter. But it was that sandwich bread video that I had that became very popular. And it's
Yes.
because it's so easy to make sandwich bread. Everybody complicates it. And we can't complicate things, especially for young homemakers. They need to be very easy, they need to be very accessible, and they need to be fast, because you're probably trying to change a diaper and control a toddler. And I understand that completely. And I showed how easy it is, that
Mhm.
you mix it up and you
And
toss
you know,
it
that
in
recipe
and you
was
let it rise. And
absolutely amazing, and I made it several times,
oh,
and it
I'm
was
glad.
so easy, and my family loved it, and as a matter of fact, my little 10-year-old niece is coming over on Monday, and we're gonna bake that bread.
Oh, I'm
She
so
doesn't know it,
happy.
but I thought, well, I'm gonna show her how to bake bread, and we're gonna do that on that day. I got this one. What are your thoughts on past Best By date canned goods? FDA standards, are they safe to use for years after the date? And should you use your eyes and nose to determine whether or not to use it?
Oh, I agree. Yeah, I think I'm so glad that the FDA released that information. I think they released that a couple of years ago because they started this program of not wanting people to waste food. And Best Buy, all that indicates is something that companies decide in their own personal opinions, I guess, on how long they think the food is going to be best and maybe at its peak. But that's sort of an arbitrary thing.
Mhm.
And so, what you need to keep in mind is, for the most part, most canned goods, now, some may take on a little bit of an off flavor, but most canned goods will be good in terms of nutrition and taste a good 5 years after the Best Buy date.
Okay.
After that, they may start to degrade in nutrition, but overall, they may not degrade in taste. They may just sort of degrade a little in nutrition. And then maybe after 10 years, they're going to start to degrade in taste. Now, that's for canned goods, and jarred goods in glass, would come under that same category. Then for packaged goods, like saltine crackers, for
Mhm.
example, uh, they never go bad. They just go stale, you know.
Yeah.
So if you package them correctly and really try to save them and not expose them to air, you can keep those fresh fairly long. And pasta, basically, it's like a forever food. Just put it into if you have those buckets, pile a bunch in buckets, throw in some bay leaves, which will keep the bugs away because they don't like the smell of bay leaves. Put your lid on and store them in a cool, dry place. Your pasta will stay fresh for a very long time, well past its best by date. The big thing,
Definitely.
the big thing is just keeping out, discouraging the weevils. And you can always use diatomaceous earth, which I only recommend if you don't have kids around, because you got to put glasses and a mask on, and you don't want anybody breathing that in.
I
But
like to use the bay leaves like you
I do
suggested.
too. I do
Yeah, I
too. I
do.
just think it's safer and easier.
So one other thing, because we're starting to run out of time, but I want to, and I don't want to keep you too long, but I do need you to talk about the traditional foods kitchen. So can you talk to us just a little bit about what does it mean to have a traditional foods kitchen or an unprocessed foods kitchen, and why is the transition a slow process?
Yeah, I first and foremost, it's a journey. It's a slow process. Never rush. I remember, I think I may have shared this with you, Denise, in the past. Years ago, I was in a Facebook group, and one day I was looking through the posts of people, and everybody was having a meltdown, and they were mostly young mothers, young homemakers. And the person running the Facebook group, who I'm sure is a perfectly nice person, but they were a zealot. And so it was one of these things where everything had to be perfect from day one. That's so unrealistic.
Hard
Because
to
if I
do.
start barking orders at you and saying, okay, you got to make bone broth, you got to do a sourdough starter, you got to be fermenting, you got to be sprout, people would run, and that's what these people were doing. They were really trying. And one girl, she left this really long post just on her wits end. And I had to leave a comment and I said, oh my gosh, honey, just roast a chicken. Don't worry about any of it. And I think that's the whole thing. And I always say that just start with a roast chicken. I think that's the best way to start weaning yourself off of processed foods. Throw in a few carrots, throw in some potatoes if you have them, cut them up, throw in some onions, save your scraps, stick those in the freezer, and just serve that. And don't worry about anything else. Don't worry. If you have Twinkies in your pantry, don't worry about it. And then over time, little by little, say, okay, I think I got this roast chicken thing under my belt. All righty, I'm feeling encouraged. I feel good about myself. I mean, I was a young cook once too, and
Mhm.
I know it's those little successes. You build on that. And then you say, all righty, I'm going to get those scraps out of the freezer. I'm going to do a bone broth. And you got to embrace trial and error, and you got to have a sense of humor because sometimes things don't always come out great, But you try bone broth and you're like, oh, okay, this is pretty good. It came out fairly gelatinous. Maybe next time I use a little less water. Maybe next time, maybe I overboiled it. And you just start to learn and you build your confidence. And those are the things that I always say start with roasting a chicken and making bone broth. And the next thing I say to do is culture dairy. And all that it means is making homemade yogurt. And all you need is 2 bowls. You don't need
I've
a
not
machine.
tried that yet, Mary. So I'll have to try that
It's
next.
it's so easy. It's so easy to do. You put one bowl in the other. You put your milk with a little bit of yogurt in it, and you fill the outside bowl with some warm water. Stick it in a warm, undisturbed place. Like in a oven that's turned off, but just with the pilot light or the electric light. You'll have yogurt in the morning. And so you just do this little by little by little,
Little by little.
and then you don't feel stressed. And everything else you can keep buying whatever you buy. If you buy sandwich bread, if you buy this, if you buy that, keep buying that. And then one day you say, I'm going to try and make that sandwich bread that she tells me. And what I like about that sandwich bread is, making bread, people say, oh, you got to do the window pane test and then you got to do the finger poke test. When I was a kid and people were talking to me about that, I was like, "Oh my god, is the dough coming back a little bit or not at all or too much? Oh gosh, did it override?" And what I love about this sandwich bread, and my mother was making this for years, you let it rise to the rim of the pan. She'd say that's good enough. Put it in the oven.
And you know what, Mary? I think that's great advice. One time I was making that bread, and I don't know, I got busy or distracted or something, and the bread rose up over the top of the rim and a little bit down the side. So I had like an extra lip on the bread. The other thing, and I know I bugged you about it a couple of times, was when I would try to slice it up, I could never get it to slice evenly so that it would go in the toaster. So when I asked you a couple of times about a slicer, and I did find one.
Oh, did you get one?
I did get one. I got a slicer because I wanted to be able to put the bread in the toaster. And if
Yes.
I didn't get it sliced just right, it wouldn't go in the toaster. And then, of course, you got to use the leftover to make French toast.
Oh
And I
yeah.
wanted it to be a good size for that. So,
Yes.
yeah. So,
Yes.
and you touched on this already, but I don't know if the people really heard it. But non-processed foods. When we talk about non-processed foods, we're talking about foods that's not prepackaged or boxed up, not Jiffy Mix and that kind of thing. Not that I love Jiffy Mix and I always buy it and my family loves it, but having flour and sugar and salt and
Mhm.
baking powder and baking soda so that you can make those things yourself. I was
Mhm.
talking to one of my nephew's girlfriend, and I was trying to encourage them to start stocking up some things so they can make things. And I says, well, don't you have flour and baking powder? And she said, no, she didn't have either one of those things.
Mhm.
She didn't
Mhm.
bake.
Yeah.
And so I think when we talk to our young homemakers, one of the things that we want them to have when we talk about things that you can make foods with is to have flour and sugar and baking powder and baking soda and
Mhm.
salt and just those kind of basic things so that you can make foods on your own
Mhm.
if you have to. So there's that.
Yes, I think that's very important, and it's fine to start with those things. Over time, if you want to incorporate whole grains into your baking, you can do that. But in time, if you want to start replacing white sugar with more whole sweeteners like the dried sugarcane juice or maple syrup or honey or whatever the case may be, that's great too. But in time, and that's why I always say learn how to just bake bread before you try to make sourdough bread. You
Yeah,
know?
I agree with that. So
Make
you know what?
yeast, it's fine.
Let's do the apron note.
Oh yeah.
And today's apron note says, what you do matters.
Oh, I love that.
What you do matters. And I thought it was the perfect apron note for this particular topic. And let's see, Mickey already pulled the number, the person, and I think it was JW Pookie. JW Pookie is the winner of the apron note. And so, JW Pookie, what I need you to do is send me your mailing address to this email, this and that with Denise. Don't put it in the chat because that's public and I don't want to expose your your mailing address to the world. So put it in the mailing address. And so that I can send you your apron note. And then, Mary, I will send you one as well.
Oh,
So,
thank
what does this
you.
mean to you? How does this resonate with you? And for those of you in the chat, or if you're on the replay, how does this apron note, what you do matters, how does that resonate with you?
I think that's very interesting because being a homemaker, and I'm sure you can relate to this too, Denise, as can the other viewers. Sometimes being a homemaker, people see it as something less than. And
Mm-hmm.
people will often say, and I've caught myself saying this, and I have to stop. I'd say, "Oh, I'm just a homemaker," or "Oh, I'm just a housewife." And my cousin would laugh, and she would say, "Oh, please come into the 21st century. It's called stay-at-home mom."
Yes.
Because you're not a housewife. But it just it you can feel sometimes a little less than, especially if you're out in a social gathering and uh, people are working outside the home doing something that seems very impressive and whatnot. And I think that uh, and I really it's interesting because I will hear this from my husband, and he doesn't really know how to cook. And today, we were home all day, and I was making three meals because, as I said, our son is here too, and so I was feeding. I felt like I was just cooking and feeding them all day, and they were so appreciative. And everything that I did, and I had like the laundry going, and the dog is in and out. That's my job, in and out, in and out. you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it it makes me realize that what I do matters, because my husband is always very sweet because I'll say, "Oh, how did you like the meal?" And he's like, "Oh, it's delicious." And he said the best ingredient is love. And I think, it's kind of
Oh,
a common expression, but I think that it makes me realize that what I do does matter. I'm
yes.
feeding my family, I'm taking care of the home. And it's interesting because one time I read in a little pamphlet that there are, and I think that it's called like the corporal works of mercy. And it's like, feed the sick, clothe the homeless, you know, uh, or feed people, clothe them, take care of the sick, all these things that you do in a Christian, way of living. And I would look at that and I'd be like, "Oh my gosh, what am I doing for the poor? What am I doing, for the sick?" And one of them is like, visit people in prison, and another is like, bury the dead, and it's all the things that you're expected to do in life.
Mm-hmm.
And this article said, if you're a mother, chances are, and a daughter of older people, and a mother to younger people, and a wife to a husband, that you probably already are clothing the naked, feeding the hungry, and I was like, I never
Definitely caring for the sick.
yeah, and caring for the sick. And I thought, but how is this person, when they're writing this article, going to handle visiting the imprisoned? And boy, did he hit on something that was so telling. And I think this was being written by a man, which made it very, because it was all about really praising the homemaker, which I thought was very nice. But it said that often you deal with things in family life. And I think we probably can all relate to this,
Yeah.
where maybe you're dealing with a mental health issue, maybe you're dealing with a substance abuse issue. And those people, he said, they're imprisoned.
Yes.
And
Oh,
so, right? You know,
yes.
and I went through the list of all of these things he was saying that people should do to live a Christian life, and how he hit on every single one that a homemaker does.
And I think
And
when
I
we
said,
think about
boy, we
homemaking,
matter. We
yeah.
matter.
So what you do really does matter. And we're getting some interesting comments in the chat, and people are really pleased with our conversation today. So thank you. One of the young ladies here, Tay Tay, says she often gets overwhelmed, but she's grateful and blessed. And Tay Tay, what I would suggest to you is just try to create a series of routines to kind of manage your house, your home, your children, your homekeeping, your meal plan. That always helps, is if you have a routine.
Mhm.
I didn't have a good routine when I was a young homemaker. Some of these skill sets I learned later in life, and I wish I had learned them much sooner. But yeah, sometimes you will feel overwhelmed, but just remember, they won't be little always. They do grow up.
True. How true. And
Yeah.
even as you and I have discussed, it's very easy, even as you get older, you get overwhelmed. You're
Mhm.
caring for family members, we have aging parents. There's a lot going on, and it can be very easy. Sometimes I'll say to my husband, I'll just sit down in the kitchen, and I'm like, I'm exhausted. I'm so overwhelmed, my mind, and physically. And sometimes you just have to sit down, and I'll tell you something funny. My mother used to go in, maybe like once a week. She would just like disappear for a little bit. And I would say, "Oh, mom, what are you doing?" She'd go, and I mean, I was a grown woman, but she was like disappearing from my father for just a break, after he retired. She said, "Oh my gosh, he's so underfoot." You know? But she said, I go into the bedroom and I close the door and I sit. She had one of those like little slipper chairs that ladies used to have in their boudoirs, and she'd sit in the slipper chair and she said, I sit and I have a diet Pepsi. And that, and I,
How decadent, a
yeah,
diet
right, a
Pepsi.
diet Pepsi. And I look at my magazines, and she had Women's Day and Family Circle. And she said, I just do that for an hour. I don't talk to anybody. I keep the door closed. Your father knows I'm having my little downtime. And so I think what's so cute is that some days I feel I've just had so much going on, and I feel tired and I feel overwhelmed,
Mhm.
and I lose sometimes. If I don't write everything down, I'm like losing track. And I'll sit down in the kitchen and my husband will see me and I'll just go humph like this, and he'll say, have you heard of the soda Zevia? I don't know if you've heard of this soda. It's sweetened with stevia,
Oh
but
no.
it's really good. And they have a Dr. Zevia, which is like Dr. Pepper, which is really popular here in
Uh-huh.
Texas, which is delicious. But this is sweetened with stevia. So it's like technically, I don't know, better for you. I don't know if soda is
Mhm.
good for us, but my husband will just go, you need a Zevia Dr. Pepper.
I think
I've
though,
become
I
my
think
mother, I've become my mother. And I think that sometimes, it's funny. My son, we were reminiscing about how I would go into the bathroom when he was a little boy, and he really never liked to be alone. But he's like, 4 or 5 years old, and I'm right there. I'm just using the ladies' room, and I would close the door.
and lock it.
and lock it. And he would say, "You need to open this door right now, Mom." You know? And I'd be like, "Oh, I'm just using the ladies' room." And so I would hear him just kind of slide down, and he would sit right outside the door. I wouldn't even be using the ladies' room. I would just be sitting on the toilet with the seat down, and I would just be sitting there and going, "Okay, okay." You know, you
Yeah.
know, and it's sort of funny to my friends who have like 6 kids. I had 1, but I was in my 40s and I was like exhausted.
I understand. I know well, my first children were twins. And
Oh,
I
God bless
remember
you.
when I would come home, sometimes I would just go into the bathroom and I would lock the door because that was the only place for privacy in the house was the bathroom.
Yes.
And I would lock the door and I would just run a tub and like Calgon take me away. And I would just lay there in the water for like 20, 30, or 40 minutes.
Yeah.
And then I would come out and refresh. Tay, send me an email and maybe we can connect and maybe I can help you sort out a few things. But so do send me an email, Tay. I did have my email address up there earlier. Let me pop it up there again. And maybe we can chat just a little bit.
Oh, and I'm just seeing I can see some comments on the side here and hippie, oh, it just popped. Oh, hippie Hebrew homestead. She said, "Tay Tay, pray about it too." If you're a religious person, I think prayer is so calming. You know, some people just do like a meditation or something. Uh, but if you're a religious person, I find prayer is fantastic. And sometimes I'll just sit down and I don't know if people, this is a very common book. It's called Jesus is Calling, or something like
I've
that.
heard of it.
Yeah. And my girlfriend has it. And sometimes she'll text me in the morning and she'll say, "Oh, I'm doing my devotional." And her devotional for today is so appropriate to what we're talking about right now. And the devotional said, and it's the book, I don't have it, but it's like the book is written like Jesus is actually talking to you. And it's so
Mhm.
sweet. That's just such a sweet concept, you know? And it was really adorable because the thing that she was feeling very overwhelmed. She was really having her day was going to be very, very full. And it was so beautiful because it said, "I know today is hard. I know this is uphill for you. I know you have so many challenges, but I'm here with you. It's not going to be easy. It's
Mhm.
going to be a rough one, but I'm here. And the good news is, and I'm paraphrasing, tomorrow's going to be better."
I like that.
And I
I like
really
that.
liked that. And I said, "You know, you always got to have that attitude. There's some light at the end of the tunnel." I think that
Definitely.
I don't know how many of your viewers know. I know that I've shared this with you, Denise. You know, I went through something I wish upon no mother so stressful. But my son, who's 20, almost 24 years old, was diagnosed with a brain tumor,
Oh,
and it was in February. It was in January, and then the very end of January and February. And you know, we didn't know anything. You know, it was large. It was pushing on the brainstem. He had to go to MD Anderson, the hospital here, you know, in
mhm.
Texas, and it was a 12-hour surgery, 61 stitches. Permanently lost the hearing in his right ear, but his left ear is fine, and his facial muscles are fine. The tumor was benign. But I got to tell you, I have never talk about stressful, but thank God I had prayer to lean upon.
Yes.
Because if I didn't have the good Lord, I don't know how I would have gotten through it. And that was stressful. So, you know, I want you to know that sometimes people look at other people's lives and they say, "Oh, wow, they have a nice life. It seems like they have an easy life. They have a nice husband," whatever the case may be. But none of us have a perfect life. A lot
Well,
of us
right.
go
You
through
never know
something.
what someone else.
You never know what somebody else is going through, you know, and thank God that's why my son is with us. You know, he's recovering and he's recovered beautifully, and he had to go for physical therapy to get his balance back and walk. But
Mhm.
you know, other than that scar in the back of his head,
And hopefully hair will cover that up. And if not, oh well.
and you know what's so cute? He doesn't even mind it. He kind of he wears his hair short, you know, he likes it short. And he says, "Oh, it's my badge of honor." You know, he says, I've been through, you know, been through a lot, you know. But I think that's something we can tell ourselves, that when we feel very stressed and when we feel overwhelmed, and I think that with all this stuff, uh, and I think it really started back when blogging became
Mhm.
very popular and ladies started comparing themselves to
Yes.
people. That's a fantasy world. That's I will even tell you, uh, I I I can't. My computer is connected to wires so that I can be, have like internet with you. Because this I have to put my laptop here, and Ted has to like run wires so we don't lose connection. But if you saw my kitchen island right now, you would say, "Oh my gosh, is that the same island she films videos from that always looks so pristine?"
So
It's
nice
covered
and
with
neat.
stuff. I've got sweet potatoes, I've got onions, I've got 3 bags of homemade granola bars that I haven't put away. I've got a big can of institutional sized pineapple that I got on a deal at Sam's, I've got my juicer out because I'm trying to like juice and be like healthy. Okay, we'll see how that goes. I've got red onions. I've got Kleenex. I've got a thing filled with biscotti. You know, I mean, it's covered. You know,
Well, exactly. And nobody's house is always perfect or always
no.
ready for company. Mary, let me just thank you so much for
Oh,
joining me
thank
tonight.
you.
This has been such a pleasure just to chat with you. And we never get through all the questions,
I
but we
understand.
cover what is needed and what the community needs. And I think
Yes,
we've really helped a lot of our young homemakers. We've certainly given them some good ideas on how they can try to stretch their budget just a little bit. So
stretch
let
their
me ask you guys in the chat, what is your aha moment? What's going to be your takeaway from today's session with Mary from Mary's Nest? What can you do from what you've learned today to stretch your budget to help fight food inflation? Tell me in the comment section. And then also let me remind you guys that starting next week, the show is going to be on Wednesday instead of Thursday. Same time, 7:45 Eastern, or rather daylight savings time now that we're in the middle, but it'll be on Wednesday. And I also want to invite you to check out my last video, decluttering in my kitchen. I've got way too much stuff. And no matter how much I declutter, I still have way too much stuff in that kitchen. So I'm working on that.
Oh, I need to see that.
I've got stuff that I don't use much anymore. And one of the ladies pointed out something. You remember those little luncheon sets that everyone got when they got married? Clear
Mhm.
crystal glass with a little punch cup, and you go to showers and teas, and everybody got a set or two as a wedding gift. I had a bunch of those, and I was going to keep them. And I thought, well, I'll put them up in the pantry, on top of the pantry shelf. Then I thought, let's just get those out, put them out in the garage in a shelf out there. Went to the shelf out in the garage, and there were already 12 out there, which meant I had 20 of these plates instead of 12. And I thought, okay, what am I going to do with these? When am I going to have another baby shower? When am I going to give another tea? And one of my viewers said, you see yourself as the hostess, and maybe that was your task in life so many times, but now you're at a point in your life where you don't have to do that hosting anymore. And I thought, oh, she's right.
Mhm.
I'm the grandmother or the great grandmother. I don't have to do that anymore. The younger women in the family can take on that role. I can give those away.
Mhm.
So we do go through a transition. And so I want to thank you for just kind of chatting on all of that. I thought this was maybe good to put up real quick. There were so many great comments that I just couldn't share on the screen. But this one regarding the life of canned and jarred food, sometimes we do throw out a lot of that. And so it bears thinking about. Um,
Yeah, just and the person previously who had mentioned that as well mentioned, the nose, the taste, the nose knows. Because
mhm.
looks funny, smells funny, then you know to discard it. But most of the time, I think I opened a can of green beans the other day and gave them for lunch. We cooked them for lunch, and I think they like had a best by date of 5 years ago. I wasn't worried about it at all, and they tasted fine.
Yeah, they're fine. So again, I'm going to wrap things up now, Mary. I'll see you in the green room. But let me
Sounds
just say to
good.
everyone, Guys,
Thank you, everyone. Good night.
thank you so much for joining us. Be sure and check Mary out on her channel at Mary's Nest. I showed you her channel. I will link her Four Corners Pantry video in the description box. It's not there yet, but I will link it in the description box so that you can click on it and then download the parts of it that you want. And then I got the last little note that I've been sent was from Mother's Helper 1981 and said, don't think you're just helping the younger people. I'm over 70 and I love your channel and have learned so much from it. I can't believe it. How did I get so old without knowing so many of these things? Well, thank you so much. I appreciate that. And speaking for Mary and myself, we both appreciate that because I don't know about you. I've learned a lot as I've gotten older too. So it's
Me too.
I think I have more
learn every day.
Yeah, I learn something new every day. So you guys, thank you so much. And be sure and join me next week on Wednesday. And for more homemaking inspiration, click the link on the screen. There'll be a link on the screen once, it does its a little thing. So anyway, good night, everybody.
Good night.